Good afternoon. So my name is Lucia Gutierrez, and I'm an assistant professor here also. And I'm a breeder, so I'm not going to talk tons about the management. I'm going to tell you about some exciting things that are coming out of our program. And so my program is focused on small grains. So we have an active oat breeding program. We're also breeding barley and wheat. And the goal of our program is to breed for sustainable systems, for sustainable cropping systems. So we do need grain yield, but we also need to make sure that we grow it in a good way. And the traits that we focus in our program are yield, but also quality, and that means different things in the different crops. And we also focus on disease resistance. And just as just one note on why small grains are important of our crop rotations, we know how good they are for building soil health. It's very important for reducing erosion, for helping with the soil structure and other properties. It increases nutrient use efficiency, it suppresses weed, it helps with the soil microbiome, and it helps with stability and resilience of the whole cropping system. So they're not like kernza, but if we are talking about a corn and bean rotation, the small grains, adding that to the rotation is very important. Also, if we're talking about the winter crops, they do provide winter cover, so it's very useful as a cover in the winter to maintain the soil health. So now to the winter wheat, what we're doing in organic. So my program focuses on both conventional and organic. I'm not just organic breeding, but we do have a few projects on organic, which is what I'm going to tell you today. So the organic winter wheat breeding, what we do is we first started this out of needs, and this was a meeting where people had come to me and Julie Dawson, who is around there, to ask for, so this was a group of farmers, but also a group of bakers and millers who were interested in having some organic wheat grown in Wisconsin. And this was for bread, so it had to have bread quality. So the needs that were identified in that meeting is that, well, we needed it locally grown or locally adapted. Both, the baker needed it locally grown, the farmer needed it adapted so that they could grow it. We needed disease resistance, and then one of the main diseases that is relevant is Fusarium head blight or scab, and we needed very good disease resistance because we cannot, there are not very effective ways to controlling this disease. And we need to, if it has scab, then we have mycotoxins, and then we cannot eat it. And then we also needed bread quality and specialty grains. So this was the main, what the farmers, bakers, millers identified as the main limitations that they needed. And so we started, or we decided to go and trial this. And this is our first trial that we did there on winter wheat. But before we could get there, we needed to start somewhere, right? On a breeding program, we need germplasm to start so that we can figure out what will grow well in Wisconsin. And there was no research done before. So we started with two groups of germplasm. One was 70 elite lines, and this came from either Midwest conventional bread, so we didn't know if they were going to perform well in organic conditions, and also some lines from France that were selected under low input. So we thought to test those to see how they did. And then at the same time, there was this other project in the Northeast, in Cornell, that they had been working on actually selecting for wheat on organic conditions. And so they were about to discontinue it because they didn't have any more funding, so we were just at the right time talking to the group. And on that project, this is not mine, this was Mark Sorrells, the breeder at Cornell, and then Julie Dawson was part of that when she was a postdoc, and then Lisa Kisinkusek, who I think is around also. She was also part of this as a PhD student. They had started working on identifying the same needs in the Northeast. And so they set up the farmer priorities. They evaluated about 200 varieties in the field. And then they evaluated 50 of those that did well in the field for protein and diseases. Then they did baking trials. sensory profiles, and they chose the parents, and they started this lines and populations. Some of the needs from the farmers were similar to ours, so they had identified also wheat competitive ability, but they were also interested in the same things that we were interested. So we decided to try those. In the first year, we did 2 trials. One was on our research station here in West Madison, and the other one was on one farmer in Illinois. And we did the trials. We evaluated all those lines, and then we did selections. We selected the best ones out of those. Mainly, this was winter kill. Whatever was killed. Remember, we had some French varieties that did not survive, most of them. So we selected heavily based on winter kill. And some of the Czechs did not survive either. And then at that time, we also were able to bring in Cornell back again to the testing of these lines. In 2019, what we did is we started increases because some of the lines seemed to be performing well, so we could maybe prepare for releases, and we also needed larger trials so we could do baking tests. So we increased in both our Midwest locations, we did increases. And then this year, so we call it 2020 because we already planted, but it's going to be harvested in 2020. What we did is we also, besides the increases that we did, we also did large farm grow-outs. So this was at several farms, and it was the Webkins. It was also Tor is growing some, and then in Illinois with the same farmer, Wilkins. So what we're doing is we're trying to have very large amount of grain so that we can bake it and do trials and evaluate them and do baking tests. But also we're interested in seeing how it performs in the farm. The bottom line is we're getting ready to release. We have 2 or 3 lines. This is only, well, we are evaluating 4. That have been fantastic in terms of yield. They have been fantastic in terms of diseases. They do have good test weights. We know they have some good protein based on some trials from Cornell, but we haven't tried them yet on a long scale in baking trials. And we hadn't tried it other than on-farm research plots, which are kind of small. We hadn't tried it in large areas on farm. So we wanted to do that before releasing, but after the summer, if they are good, we're going to be prepping them and releasing them. So this is some data, and I think there is not tons of time to go into the data, but that's some of the ones that are still being tested this year after a heavy selection. And then the pink ones are the ones that are being tested on the farm, and those are just yield data, so maybe not so interesting. There are a few others that are still doing good, and we're further testing, but they didn't have enough seed to do large trials. We're growing this with red clover, underseeded red clover, and we frost-seed it in the winter. We have been evaluating diseases with a plant pathology group here. You can see the beautiful carpet of red clover there on the winter weeds. This is some data on Fusarium, on scab. Remember, this was very important. And we have found some lines that are doing fantastic. So it's not, the testings in Cornell were not highly correlated to our ratings in the Midwest, so it seems to be something going on there that their data is not completely applied to the Midwest. But we still need this data on the large farm, on-farm performance. We want to see it in the farm before releasing, and we're testing it with baking trials. So for the baking, we have partnered with Madison Sourdough and Andrew Hutchinson. And so what we had done is we have set up all the protocols for doing the baking trials, and we're going to run the trials in about a month or so because we now have the 2019 grain to do it. So by the summer, we should be ready to release the lines that do well. And they are going to have winter hardiness, they are going to be disease resistance, good agronomics, and good baking quality. So we're excited about this project because we're going to be able, I think we'll see how this season goes, but we're going to be able to provide this wheat for the feeding and right for the market needs, but also for the farmers' need. So we're excited about this project. And then the second project that they asked me to talk about today is one on organic naked barley. And this is a multi-use organic naked barley. So what we're doing is, barley is usually covered with a grain cover. Wheat is naked, right? And that in wheat happened about 10,000 years ago, and in barley it has not happened yet. So there are advantages and disadvantages of having the grain cover. In terms of brewing, for example, having the grain cover works very well with the filter systems that we have because the whole works as a filter. But we can still brew it if it is naked. We just need to use different filter systems. But the advantage of going naked in barley is that it can be readily available as a food crop. And currently, if we want to remove the hulls, then we pearl the barley, and that means that now it's no longer whole grain. And so there are advantages and disadvantages of having it. But mainly, if you want to have it as a food, it's very convenient. It's less labor, more faster also, and more cheap, I guess, to get it there, and then it preserves the whole grain status. So I'm not going to go into tons of details of this because we have just a few minutes, but we're breeding so that we can make barley naked, but also have it multi-purpose, not just brewing, but also food and also feed. And for this, this is part of a very large grant, and there are collaborators all over the US, so Cornell, Minnesota, Oregon State are all partners. And we have been doing spring regional trials. We have also done fall regional trials. So far, very little success, but last winter, there were a few lines out of our diversity panel that survived the winter, so maybe we'll see if they survive this winter. Maybe we'll be able to go with a winter crop, but we're testing both fall and spring planted. And then we also have a diversity panel that has a very large diversity. So the idea of the spring and the fall regional trials is those are the most advanced materials that work in some parts. Some are doing fantastic in Oregon, and some are doing great in Minnesota. So they might be ready for immediate release. But we're also trying to get more diversity and also find the parents to do selection. So the idea is that we're going to start crosses next year and start breeding more heavily for adaptation to Wisconsin. Again, this is some data, but I'm not going to go into detail on the data, but if you're interested, we can talk about it. This project also has a large outreach component. We have done a lot of field days, but we have also been involved, and Julie has been involved on this, on all the panels with cooks and chefs that are working on using it for different food products, and bakers also. And so it has a very large outreach component. It has a K-12 education component, so we have been working with kids in schools, and that has been a lot of fun too. We had more than 150 kids coming to campus to work on barley as an example for learning science. And we have another close to 300 that are going to be coming in May also, so very exciting. And this is also we're also partnering with Madison Sourdough in the baking test. These were some pita bread that were made out of the barley and then tasted. And the idea is that we're trying to go into getting all the multi-purpose uses for the barley. So the barley is a little bit more behind than the wheat in terms of releases, but the wheat is probably going to be ready for next planting season too, if everything goes well.